pause my recording. Tafaddal, Imam Hussein, and don't forget the dua for all the sick people, inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina Maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. اللهم ارحمنا ارحم والدينا ارحم أولادنا ارحم أقربائنا ارحم أصدقائنا وارحم إخواننا في الله واشفي مرضانا وارحم موتانا وارحم أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم رب الناس أذهب البأس واشفي أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاؤك شفاء لا يغادر سقما ولا ألما وننزل من القرآن ما هو شفاء ورحمة للمؤمنين ويشفي صدور قوم مؤمنين وشفاء لما في الصدور قل هو للذين آمنوا هدى وشفاء وإذا مرضت فهو يشفين فيه شفاء للناس. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وروح الأرواح وغذائها وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما. اللهم افتح لنا بالخير واختم لنا بالخير واجعل عواقب أمورنا بالخير بيدك الخير والعافية إنك على كل شيء قدير. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلق ونور عرش محمد مصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم. وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.
Shukran, Imam Hussein, and welcome to everyone who has joined us on this cold and beautiful day. What we're going to do is to just briefly touch on, or rather I suggested, or Imam Hussein suggested, that what we should do is to briefly recap on good and bad comes from Allah, but that will be part of understanding the whole concept of predestination, and we could then go into more detail and recap what we've said. So what I will do is to immediately go into the actual topic itself, and we'll take it from there, inshallah. Welcome, Sheikh Waib.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. So the concept of predestination is something that we have been warned about not to go into too much detail, because it's such a difficult and endless subject to understand, because we are trying to understand what Allah has decreed and what Allah's will is, and that is unknowable to us. No one can ever know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will is and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed. It's outside what human beings have been designed to understand. It's totally outside that. So, but having said that, understanding and accepting that predestination is one of the arkans of Iman, it means that if we don't have a sufficient understanding of this topic, we could well find ourselves in a situation where our Iman is incomplete, or our Iman is not based on a solid foundation. So the whole thing about understanding predestination is not to try and understand everything there is to know about predestination, but to understand enough to have secure understanding of Tawhid, and for it not to affect our Aqidah. I don't know where that is coming from. Okay. So what we'll do, we'll go over to the first slide. Now, one of the things already, and I'm just quickly going to run through this. We'll go to through the detail of it afterwards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that Allah created us and our actions. Allah created the doer and the actions of the doer. That in itself can be a very difficult concept to correctly understand. Now, some of the things that we've dealt with before, in particular the session we had on cause and effect, I think should give us some kind of foundation on how to interpret that. But we will take that concept along with two of the hadith. Now, many of us are familiar with the hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that 50,000 years before Allah created creation, Allah instructed the pen to record everything that was going to happen in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. It's called the preserved tablet because it is something that is totally unchangeable. Whatever Allah has decreed, whatever is going to happen in the entire universe in creation is recorded there. It is a record of from the beginning of time till the end of time of whatever will happen, and it stands there as a record of the history of the universe, of all the activity. And it is totally unchangeable. Nothing whatsoever can change what is recorded in the preserved tablet. Then there's another hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, and I quote, "There is none of you but his place has been assigned either in the fire or in paradise." And the companions inquired, "O Allah's Messenger, why should we carry on doing good deeds? Shall we depend on qadr and give up work?" The hadith goes further, but I thought that was the part that I wanted to highlight. Now, many questions might arise now. Do we truly have free will and choice? Can we do what we want? And how does our actions fit in with reward or punishment if things have been preordained? Preordained means it has been decided, it has been decreed, it's been ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the general understanding that we have of preordainment or the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that those things are unchangeable. That's the general kind of thing, but we will go into a further discussion. Then the fact that, or the question that can arise is, before we were even born, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decide who's going to Jannah and Jahannam? Where do our choices fit in? Where does the concept of reward and punishment fit in? Then further on, we will also hear that certain things have been decreed for us, like our sustenance, our lifespan, and so on. How do we understand that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we, in fact, even as part of our lives, that we make dua for increase in our sustenance, for increase in our lifespan, and things like that? How should we understand that when these things have been decreed? Now, if we don't have a proper understanding of this, then our iman cannot really be.
Tamani.
Yes.
Tamani.
Yes, Imam Hussein.
Tamani.
Yes.
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
Manie,
Yes, is that better now?
No, we can
I
hear you
can
clearly.
hear.
We can
Assalamualaikum.
hear you clearly, inshallah. No problem.
Oh, you can hear
Manie,
me.
we can't hear you.
Yes, we can hear you. Something wrong on.
Imam Hussein, there's probably something wrong on your side because everyone else can hear me. So I am not sure. Maybe your line is not great. But let's continue, and maybe your signal.
Manie,
Imam Hussein, can you hear me? No, Imam Hussein can't hear me. Let's hope that he will be able to, his signal will improve and he'll be able
Manie,
to. I'm not sure how to deal with this, eh? Okay, there, Imam Hussein, unmute.
I sent him a chat with the Salie Manie. Maybe he needs to restart his phone or something.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Don't worry. Might
Okay.
continue, inshallah.
Okay. All right. We will continue, inshallah.
Manie, can you hear us?
Farid, so that I can continue, are you able to send him a message?
Yes.
Okay, inshallah. Shukran. He must just restart his phone. So if certain things have been decreed, what would be the point of making dua for it? Because the way we would understand in decree, Allah has determined that upfront. But let's go on.
Manie,
Allah. Okay, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to Imam Hussein, if you can hear me, please okay, I'm going to remove him. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Imam Hussein. I hope you will join us now. Without going into a lot of detail, because we've touched on this, that when we talk about what Allah has predetermined or the decree of Allah, then there's different levels of understanding of this matter. The level of Islam, the level of Iman, and the level of Ihsan. And as we've indicated, there's also the level of Irfan, which we won't touch on now. And I don't even want to repeat what we've said, but your level of Islam might be quite okay at that level, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the way you believe at the level of Islam is necessarily correct when you talk about the level of Iman or the level of Ihsan. So the next step then for us would be we've said it's a pillar of Iman. Let me just go immediately into when we talk about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the creation, generally, human beings have been given a very special place. And our role is entirely different from the rest of the creation. We have taken on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offered us right before we were even born, where we were in the state of where only our souls were created. Now at that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offered us the opportunity to accept free will and choice. Now free will and choice was offered to the rest of the creation. They felt that they would not be able to make the right decisions if they were put between right and wrong and to always make the right decisions. They were too scared and they turned down the offer. Now, when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offered it to them, we must understand that this is so that we as human beings can understand. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed them, they wouldn't have been able to turn it down. So it's a means of us trying to understand this concept that man accepted the question of free will and choice even before they were born into the material world. So Allah designed the world in such a way where whatever we look at, we can see it is composed of opposites. Night and day, good and bad, hardship and ease, joy and sadness, knowledge, ignorance, life, death. And we are always in between the two throughout your life. Most decisions that we make would be based on having to choose between one option or another. Sometimes we're not even clear about what our choices are, but if you examine it, then it's always having to decide between one thing or another. Sometimes it's just deciding to do or not to do. That's also an example of opposites. Now, one of the things that would be crucial to remember is every single person in the entire creation has their own very specific set of conditions that Allah creates for that particular person. And no two people are treated exactly the same. Whether they come from the same home, they might have the same background and upbringing and education and everything, but there would be other things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would, conditions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create that makes them different from one another. And therefore, each of us will come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our record of deeds, both good and bad. And it's unique to each one of us. And the relationship that we therefore have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also unique. It's not something that human beings are treated as a category and everyone is treated like that. Every single person has a personal, direct relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the conditions within which you are going to be tested is determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, it reminds us then of what the Quran says, why we have been created. To test which of us would be best in our conduct, in our behavior, and what we do, and how we exercise our choices. That is actually why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us there. If we link it back to the original point that we made, that free will and choice was offered to the rest of creation and we accepted it. We accepted that offer of having to live our lives and choosing between right and wrong. So, if we look at that, and we've made this point before, I will just quickly just mention it when we dealt with good and bad, that it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A reminder for us of what is that when we said good and bad was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And before I go further, I would like to just pause on that point and hear if the understanding that we tried to communicate in the last session, whether we are still on the same page with respect to the understanding of Allah created both good and bad. So can I hear? I'm going to open the floor now for responses to how we should understand that Allah created both good and bad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Muhammad Yunus. Tafaddal.
So basically, in a nutshell, in my understanding, is that Allah created the good and the bad. He set down certain laws and conditions, and because we have been, as insan, we have been given the choice. We then decide whether to act upon that good or bad. So whether we do the bad, there will be consequences of that. But the actual good and the bad has been created by Allah, which means He is the source of it. And we have the choice whether to conduct ourselves in that manner.
Okay. I'd like somebody else to respond now, Yunus. Now I want to ask a question. Is it not true, and we made this point right at the beginning of the session, that Allah is the one who created the doer and the actions of the doer? How do we understand that part when we are talking about Allah created good and bad? Anyone else?
Assalamualaikum, Maaf Putra Salie.
Yes.
Imam Hussain is ready to enter now. You can allow him to enter, inshallah, to join.
Okay. Muhammad Farid, do you want to respond to the question?
Regarding the fa'il maf'ul, the doer, the action, Bismillah. It is that the way of my understanding is that Allah Ta'ala gives us the ability to do everything. So if we, inshallah, intend to do good or intend to do bad, Allah allows us to do that action. So everything is in Allah's control. So for example, if we want to kill somebody, we want to stab somebody, that action of stabbing someone, that action of doing that, that is all in the control of Allah. Allah is allowing you to do that. Nothing we can do on our own. That very small, that small opportunity, that window that we have of choices, what Allah Ta'ala gives us, and whatever we decide to do after that, Allah Ta'ala is in control of everything. So Allah doesn't just leave us and allow us to be. We are still in the control of Allah. Every movement, every breath, every thought, every link, everything is in control of Allah. That's why Allah sustains us. Allah just doesn't create us and let us be.
But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah created us and our actions, are we able to do that? Are we able to stab?
No, not on our own, not without Allah. So Allah created us and our actions. So that means Allah created us, and whatever we do, while my hand that's moving now, my hand that's speaking, Allah is in control of everything.
Okay, now what I want to remind all of us, we must take the things that we've dealt with before and add it to our understanding and be clear about it. What I was hoping someone would say is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, Aisha.
Like Putra Salie, Manie told us that Allah effect comes from Allah.
Alhamdulillah.
And Allah, yeah, we make the choice, but the effect of that choice only Allah is up to Allah if it will happen or not.
Alhamdulillah. Shukran for reminding us. Effect can only come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing in the entire creation has the ability to make things happen. Allah's ability or power never transfers to the means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not give the water the ability to quench the thirst. Never. Otherwise, at that point, that water would have an equivalent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create the effect of quenching the thirst. So Allah uses that as a means, but what we must remember is that the means never has that power transferred to it. That effect of the fire burning comes solely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're going to have to remind one another constantly about effect can only be created the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we said about good and bad, Allah created the possibilities. Allah created the opportunity and the possibilities for us to create good and bad, but Allah does not commit the bad. Allah puts us between these opposites of good and bad, and then Allah gives us the one thing we've been given is choice. To create effect we don't have. We can't do things. We're talking now about the level of Iman and Ihsan. We're not talking about the level of Islam. The level of Islam, that's different. Now, the point of why it is so important to understand that effect can never be created by anyone other than Allah is so that we don't believe like the Qadariyah believed. What did the Qadariyah believe? Is there anyone who want to volunteer what the Qadariyah's belief is?
The Qadariyah believes that we have free will and choice, but we are responsible for whatever choices we make.
Yeah, and you must add in the question of effect. Then you've got it complete there,
Yeah,
Aisha.
yeah.
So what would you add to that?
Whatever the consequences and effect is of our choice, that is our own fault.
It's not just
And-
our own fault. They believe that they can create effect, that Allah doesn't interfere with their ability to do whatever they want to do. Once Allah has created them with free will and choice, they believe that they can create their own effect, whether it's good or bad. They will have to account for their actions, but they believe that they can create effect. And Allah doesn't interfere. And we must be careful that we never ever believe that. As people who are on the path of trying to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correctly and His sifat, we must never ever make the mistake to say effect can be created by anything or anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So what we are going to do now, we're going to go on to the next point, but please remind ourselves of those things that we've just recapped on. It's a pity about Imam Hussein. I don't know what's happened to him now.
No, I'm in now. I'm in with the Salie.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah.
I'm on another phone. I don't know what happened, but I missed quite a lot of the lecture so far.
But
I'm in now.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I just want to say that inshallah, if once we're done, I will upload it to YouTube so people can get it from there, inshallah. So we were reminded about the different stages of predestination, where the Quran and the Hadith speaks about different times of the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, we've referred to this one, 50,000 years, and we're going to try and touch on each of these to understand what that actually means. That 50,000 years before creation came into existence, Allah instructed the pen to record everything that will happen in the preserved tablet. Okay, we know about that. Let me just go through the stages, and then we'll try and deal with each one separately. Or let me rather just deal with that. Otherwise, we're going to have too many things to come back to. One of the big mistakes that many people make when they ponder on these issues, when they look at this hadith, then they think that this tablet has been cast in stone. It is unchangeable. Is it unchangeable? Yes, it is unchangeable. It cannot be changed by anyone or anything. And that is a record of the entire history of creation. So if that is the case, does it mean that we have no role to play even before we are born, that everything has been recorded? One person is going to be rich, the other person is going to be poor, one person will be tall, one will be short, one will be married, one will be unmarried. Are these things all recorded and cast in stone? As far as this hadith is concerned, we must not make that error, because it is a record. And the record, although it is fixed and not subject to change, it is not something where every single thing has been predetermined, especially as far as human beings are concerned. Remember, we are different to the rest of creation. So Allah has determined there's going to be earthquakes, and there's going to be rain on this day, and there's going to be sun shining on another day, and whatever else. As far as human beings are concerned, there is the question of choice. So what Allah has done, we actually have to go to the sifat of Al-Alim. Allah is all-knowing. Now, I wonder if I shouldn't just quickly go there. Yes, let me just quickly go there so that we can. Just bear with me. Sure. I tried to maybe go in too much detail on these things, but I'm going to the attribute of knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is limitless. Now, when we say perfection or infinite, it means that in fact, it's not only the attribute of knowledge. Everything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is utterly and totally perfect. There's nothing that can change or be altered, added to or subtracted. It cannot be raised or elevated. It cannot also be decreased. Everything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is utterly perfect. So if we apply that to the attribute of knowledge or any other attribute for that matter, they equally have the same qualities of perfection and being beginningless and endless and so on. So we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything that the child knows. We're not making progress yet. But when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is perfect, the one thing we must understand about the perfection is that it is never in need for something to happen first before it can be known. Why not? We've covered this before when we dealt with the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I am actually repeating this so that we can ingrain it in our thinking and make it part of our own personal lives and understanding. Yes, Yunus?
I would like to attempt this, inshallah.
Yes, please do.
Everything has been set in stone in the Lawh al-Mahfuz.
Yes. Yunus, before you go on,
yes.
We're talking now, before we talk about that, we're talking now about the attribute of knowledge.
Yes.
Why is it never, why can nothing ever be added to Allah's knowledge? That's the question. Okay. Huh? And
yes.
we'll come back to the Lawh al-Mahfuz. Okay.
So the knowledge is all encompassing because everything in creation, past, present, and future, is in one. So his knowledge is totally encompassing. Nothing is hidden. Even time is not hidden, if that makes sense. So because of that knowledge, that Allah knows what was, is, and is to come. Right? So if we put it in one bowl, for example, that knowledge of everything is there already. And it's not dependent on time to unfold. We are dependent on Allah in order for things to unfold for us or through us. And if that makes sense. For the effect to take place, we are dependent on that time. And we don't know because our ability to see into the future, which is time, it is impossible for us to do that.
Okay. I was hoping we would concentrate. Okay, Aisha.
Human beings, we need, for every action, there's a reaction. For us, for something to happen, there has to be a trigger. But for Allah, Allah does not need a trigger for anything to happen, for something to happen.
Shukran, Aisha. You see, if we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge, if, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not know something before it actually happened, it would mean that Allah's knowledge does not encompass that what must still happen. So Allah's knowledge is at a certain level. We're talking if now. If something happens, then Allah knows about it. It would mean that would add to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. What would that mean? It would mean at that point before it happens, then Allah is imperfect. There's a gap that needs to be filled. It points to imperfection. It points to need. It points also to reliance. So it's important for us to look at it in that kind of way. Allah is never in need. Allah is never dependent on anything. And Allah is entirely self-sufficient, whether creation exists or not exists. And the question about time is important, Yunus, yes. The point about time is important, is that time is a creation of Allah. That's the way, if we want to explain it to somebody else. Time is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If time is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that which Allah created can never be used to impact on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that is a point that we must remember when we deal with other issues along the line. Time never applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah doesn't have to wait. So the attribute of knowledge is something that is directly linked to understanding. That hadith of 500 years before the time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew already, before creation came into existence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knew the way we explained it now, because Allah is never in need and Allah created time. So that hadith refers not to Allah's decision about, or the decree about our decisions. Allah recorded how we would exercise our choice while we were here, whether it was good or bad. Now, how would we understand that at that time, everything was recorded, but it was also recorded who's going to Jannah and Jahannam? How do we understand that? It's a question. Muhammad Fasih. Or anyone else? It's not easy to understand, eh? Allah recorded who's going to Jannah and Jahannam, and it can't be changed. Yes, Muhammad Fasih.
Doesn't it come back to?
Just hang on, Yunus. Muhammad Fasih.
Is Brother Salie able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. What I was maybe just in as far as Brother Salie's point previously with time is concerned, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not governed by time and space. And therefore, when we look at the fact that Allah knows who's going to Jannah and who's going to Jahannam, Allah knows what the progression of people's lives are going to be. Allah knows exactly what choices they will make. Even though Allah gave man free will and choice, Allah knows what the results of his choices will be. And so therefore, we spoke about the fact that Allah is not governed by time, and time is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah knows the past, Allah knows the present, Allah knows the future. So therefore, even the choices that man has made is already known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, man's place is designated in Jannah or Jahannam based on what Allah knows is already going to do.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I can add very little to that, except to say Allah's knowledge about how we will behave and exercise our choices will land us in Jannah and Jahannam. Our choices and our actions will determine where we land up. Allah doesn't determine beforehand, you're going to Jannah and you're going to go to Jahannam. It's a question of understanding this thing about time. That time doesn't apply to Allah, so Allah knows right at the end. Allah knows the ending of the movie. So Allah knows who's going to go where. We made the choices all along, but Allah knows where we're going to land up, not because Allah determines for us or decides who's going to go to Jannah and Jahannam, as far as the attribute of knowledge is concerned. Now, previously we said that we must understand that it's not just a question of understanding the attribute of knowledge. The scholars who discuss these issues and study these issues, they said there are 3 sifat that must be considered together to get a correct understanding of the question of predestination. The one is knowledge, power, and will. They are referred to as the linked sifat. And if we understand all 3, then the understanding of the question of predestination, what Allah has decreed, suddenly becomes clear if we understand the specific sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we've been through all 3 of those sifat when we dealt with the 20 sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we're putting the links together, and we said that hopefully it will now become a bit more clear. So if we look at the question of knowledge, then it's easy for us now to understand the hadith that 500 or 50,000 years before Allah created creation, that Allah recorded who's going to go to Jannah and Jahannam. Because we now understand correctly the attribute of knowledge. Okay, so, all right, that question was, in a sense, I thought the screen came up. Oh, there's it. The last point, I think, speaks for itself, eh? Allah didn't preordain we must do bad and go to Jahannam, or preordain we must do good and we had no choice in it. There's no decision that Allah took with respect to our choices. Allah will never punish us. Allah is too fair to send people to Jahannam if Allah took or force them to do certain things. We'll get to the other parts of this understanding, inshallah. Okay, I think we made, if we did of Allah subhanahu. Hello, is my audio back?
Yes, Brother, but the video is still off.
Is my audio back?
So, Brother Salie, the video is off, but the audio is back.
Hello? 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 Okay, let me just check here.
I can hear you.
Can everyone else hear me?
I can hear Brother Salie.
Okay, alhamdulillah. I just went off there for a while. So, if we look at the question of knowledge, it solves a big problem of one part of the difficulty that people have with respect to already the whole question of understanding predestination. So, and basically repeating the point, foreknowledge or pre-knowledge or knowing beforehand must not be confused with the fact that Allah made our decisions for us. Allah recorded because Allah knew what we are going to decide and recorded those decisions of how we will exercise our choices, and the result of the choices we made landed us up either in Jannah or Jahannam. I use the example there of a person who's, just so that one can understand the concept, a person watching a movie, not that, may Allah forgive us, we're using a worldly example so that we can better understand the concept. In the same way that the person is watching a movie that he has seen already with somebody else, you know what is going to happen before it even gets there. So you have knowledge of something that's about to happen, and you know what it is. So you can say, this is going to happen because you've watched the movie. So in a sense, that movie of our lives is known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are other examples of where people dream, and it happens exactly like that, where Allah gives us a glimpse of what Allah's sifat of being Al-Alim, the all-knowing, what it actually means. I don't want to move on further to the attribute of power. I want to pause and I want to find out whether the concept of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sifat of knowledge should be understood in relation to the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let me pause there and find out whether we all have the concept clear, and if we have the concept clear, then maybe we can move on. But let's just first hear if everyone is clear.
The concept is clear. It's just it's a lot to accept.
Okay. would you be able to explain it to somebody else?
I think we always thought we had power and our dua and now to truly understand that all power is with Allah, all knowledge is with Allah.
Do we have knowledge? Do we
Now,
ever?
all knowledge is with Allah.
But do we know things? Has Allah given us the ability to know things?
Yes, Allah has given us the ability to understand and learn.
Yeah. As long as we understand that to mean, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we ask, are we alive? Yes, we are alive. Do we exist? Yes, we exist. But our existence, our knowledge is all because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created that possibility for us to be alive. Let me just go back to one of the things about knowledge. I didn't want to touch on this, but because people understood the concept so quickly and so well, let me point this. I thought we could do this when we have a follow-up on the question of knowledge. Knowledge, as far as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned, should be understood in this way. That every single thing that we see or that we know about is part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. Now, if we speak generally, then it's easy to understand. But if you take it down a few levels, if you look at the blade of grass and you look at the shape, its color, and how it bends in the wind, or when somebody tramps on it, that shape, that color, that form, how long it's going to live, how long it's going to take before it dies, for every blade of grass. Just think how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. When you talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge, Allah knows everything. When you drive around along the road and you look at the tar on the road and you think of how is the tar composed, it's got this black material, bitumen, that covers, you see that, but below that you have these small pebbles that they throw on there. Every single pebble, the shape, how long it's going to last, is within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. Not only of that road that you are driving in, but all the roads and all the grass and all the leaves and all the trees, and how every atom within every single human being, every single atom in every single human being is known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah knows how many atoms we have. Allah is in control of all of those atoms. So when we talk about Allah's knowledge, by just walking around outside, you should see that everything is under Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. It's encompassed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sifat of being all-knowing. So when you walk out there, Allah is not only the creator of everything that you see, Allah knows everything and nothing is new to Allah. Now comes, if you take another one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Khaliq, the creator. Allah creates because that is within Allah's knowledge. Allah doesn't create without knowledge. It's not something that is done accidentally. Allah's knowledge encompasses every single thing that we see around us. So if we look at any shape, Subhanallah. One of the other names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Musawwir, the one who gives form and shape. Every single shape you see around you, whether it is you take a piece of string and you let it fall, and it falls in that particular way, and it has that shape, and you pick it up and you throw it in a different way. Every form or possible way that that string can fall has already been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge, the reminder should be all around us. You should see the manifestation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sifat and his names wherever you turn your face. If you understand not only this sifat, but the other sifats. But this is a great place to start. So if we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge, just remember every single thing in the entire creation has been created as a possibility, because nothing is ever new to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't add anything. So scientists create a robot or something, a robot that can do fancy things. That possibility of that robot ever being able to do X, Y, or Z has been created in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge already. It exists. It exists. So let me hear if there's any other thing that people would like to say at this stage.
But Salie,
Yes.
if I can maybe then just say, can we also then say that not only the external, like for instance, Salie once mentioned that even clay shaped by a child, each and every single form that takes is in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah knows and decreed what shapes would exist, including that shape of that particular piece of clay as Allah has fashioned it. But can we say then that even in the mind of the human being, whatever invention, whatever idea, for instance, in the tropics, for instance, people will look at the blades of grass and say, I can actually weave this into a hat and wear this. So people will take those blades of grass and they'll weave it. Even the concept and the idea that exists in their brain. And the first draft and the second draft, before they actually get to what they think will be a suitable form, that even that itself is of the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds and has given unto them to be able to conceive, to be able to do the things that they ultimately do. So that even that knowledge is what Allah gifted to them without anything being taken from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet Allah is in control even of that knowledge.
Very good. Subhanallah. In fact, the example that you use is a very nice example. So we can never come up with anything that's new. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all possibilities that will ever happen in the entire universe, not only by us, but out there in space. How things crash and form new things and objects, and how they combine, how they split. All of those things has been created in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge, because if it didn't exist in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge, it would have meant that within creation certain things can emerge, which is then added to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. That would mean before that knowledge became known, that Allah was lacking in that knowledge, and that clearly is not possible. Any other final points or comments that people wish to make?
Salie,
Yes.
Salie, if Allah can create anything from nothing. And if we, in our secondary, after Allah has effected whatever we're doing, we can only do it from something. We need something to do something.
Yes.
So, but
No, I understand.
Allah create from nothing. Allah create from nothing. Allah don't need anything to create something, but we create something to create a thing.
Yeah.
We can't create something from nothing. Yeah.
Unless you become of the awliya, then what happens? You see how these things work is that it's linked to the levels of belief. If you've moved from the level of Sharia and you move to the level of Islam, to the level of Ihsan and the level of Irfan, then what happens is the laws which apply to human beings generally is understood by us. I can't fly. Neither can you, Imam Hussein. Or maybe I think so. Maybe you can't fly and I'm not even aware of it. Maybe you have reached one of those stages that we are not aware of. I'm saying it lightly because there are people who can do things that we would regard as miraculous. Now, how do you get to that? The way you get to that is the purification of the heart, where you remove anything that is other than Allah from your heart, and you fill it with the remembrance and the love and the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts giving you abilities that does not depend on the material laws. Other laws now apply. The law of the ghaib. So it is possible, but under normal circumstances, yes, we accept that we need tools to perform a function. We need material to create things out of those things. But Allah creates by merely giving the instruction of kun. So yes, you are right, Imam Hussein. You are right. Any other final comments? Is there anything else from anyone? Because then we're going to conclude. Muhammad Farid, any final comments?
Alhamdulillah, I think the attribute regarding knowledge, wallah, is extremely important to understand, because before, when we discussed the concept, it was actually in its own very difficult to understand, I must be honest. But as soon as we started to understand the knowledge of Allah and the attributes of Allah, then only became clear. So without that, it was extremely difficult, I must be honest. And once we know that Allah's knowledge is complete and so forth and cannot be acquired, and that became much more clearer to understand that. So subhanAllah, just shukran for that, Manie.
Okay. Yunus and Muhammad Fasih, any final things that you wish to say before we conclude the session?
But Salie, maybe not a comment on what we've discussed, but just a reminder, tonight between 11 and 12, we'll be continuing with the Tawhid series, inshallah, Tawhid in the creation.
Say where and
on VOC,
Voice of the Cape.
Voice of the Cape, between 11 and 12, inshallah, and people can tune in. We'll be dealing with the sifat of al-wujud, inshallah.
Okay, shukran for that reminder.
But that's very late. I'm in dreamland already.
It will be available, but Hussein, it will be available on Iono FM for people to download. But it's a rebroadcast. Okay. It airs on a Thursday night between 7 and 8 now for the next couple of weeks, and it's replayed on a Sunday between 11 and 12. Inshallah.
So just to repeat that,
Inshallah.
it's between 7 and 8 on a Thursday, and it's rebroadcasted Sunday evenings between 11 and 12. And these sessions, I upload onto YouTube. You just go to Salie Manie, my channel, and you go to the videos, and if you want to replay anything, it'd be useful to go over it just to sharpen your understanding. And the way you're going to actually know whether you fully benefited from it is to actually explain it to somebody else. You don't have to do it here on our sessions here. Explain it and you will find where you are absolutely clear. Now, the moment you start getting to that point where you're on solid ground, you can feel, no, I am clear. I am clear about this. This can never be like this. Then you know you are making progress. But you will only find that out when you test your own understanding by explaining it to other people. So do that. This is clearly not enough, you know, on a Wednesday and a Sunday to just go through all of these things and expect that you're going to emerge out of this, inshallah. Yunus, did you still want to say something?
See, Yunus. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما
Shukran.
علمتنا.
I need to express my gratitude to Salie, especially for the time and the effort, and alhamdulillah. Allah increase for you, inshallah. Bless you, Ita, to dissect and disseminate these understandings, alhamdulillah. Shukran. Jazakallah khairan.
Yeah. But I actually wanted to avoid that because those are the things. Whenever we have time, we should speak about the nafs. Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani says, actually, as advice to his murids. Amina, your mic is on. Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani Qaddasallahu Sirrun Aziz says that one should not place oneself in a position where people praise you, because you can easily fall in the trap by accepting that praise as belonging to you. And we just heard Allah created everything. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's better for me and for my nafs. I am weak. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make me worthy of those things. Amen. And that I accept it in the way that is pleasing to Allah and never take what does not belong to me and what actually belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shukran very much.
Salie, one last point we can end off on this point. The dua we usually make. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana. Innaka antal alimul hakim. We submit, we declare that we've got no knowledge. And the knowledge that we do gather is from Allah.
Subhanallah.
This is what the dua says.
My Arabic is not as good as yours, Imam Hussein.
So you can't claim that you know.
But how many times do we go out in the world? People explain things to you, say, I know. That I know is so part of our life. We say we believe correctly. And if we look at our lives, we actually believe incorrectly. For years, I've believed incorrectly. May Allah forgive me for all those years that I've believed incorrectly and I've taken things that doesn't belong to me. We must clean our hearts and we must purify our belief that we never take Allah Ta'ala subhanahu wa ta'ala's haqq. That we claim for ourselves what doesn't belong to us. We sit and we think, even we might not say it to other people, just the way we think. And that is what we are trying to do when we say we're trying to purify our hearts. When we remove everything that has to do with the world and the nafs, and shaitan and remove that, and we give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not easy. It's not easy because it changes in forms. Today you can see it clearly. Tomorrow it comes and it's disguised itself, but it's the same thing. And there you fall in the trap. May Allah protect us from all of this. But shukran for that dua, and maybe it's a dua that we must include in every session that we have, inshallah.
To know that you know.
Okay.
The Yunus can make the dua after Salie.
Yunus, this looks like your permanent job now. Imam Hussein is asking you to make the closing dua. And shukran once again to everyone who participated in the session. Shukran. Jazakallah. Shukran. Tafadal Yunus.
Fatiha. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم يا ربنا لك الحمد شكر كله ولك الحمد شكر كله ولك الحمد شكر كله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد عدد خلقه ونفسه وزيت عرشه وعدد كلماته اللهم ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحانك الله لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ربنا زد علما وارزقنا فهما وزدنا بالصالحين اللهم فتوحنا اللهم افتح علينا عارفين اللهم افتح علينا عارفين اللهم افتح علينا عارفين اللهم طهر قلوبنا من النفاق وأعمالنا من الرياء وألسنتنا من الكذب اللهم اجعلنا من الذاكرين والشاكرين ومحسنين ومخلصين ومن المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم لا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم تحيتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتحة.
Shukran very much, Brother Yunus. The next sifat we will be doing will be on the attribute of power. And I must say, I am quite pleased about how people have taken what we've covered thus far and applied it. And alhamdulillah, in my limited assessment, I can see that we have already made progress, because at the end of the day, what is our purpose here on earth? To become knowers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can only become knowers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we understand the sifat and the names and the things about Allah's perfection and oneness. And I must say, I am extremely pleased that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open more of the doors and remove the veils of His knowledge to fall on our hearts. Let me just make the final point about this. When we make dua and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, we mustn't make the mistake to say that Allah's waiting on us to make dua so that Allah can respond to us. Generally, we speak like that. But is that correct? If you really look at what we've been discussing up to now, Allah can't wait on anything. Waiting is a sign of need, which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's response to our du'as, or whatever we're going to ask, has already been made. It is there. We have to open the door ourselves. That love, that knowledge and everything is waiting to come in. We haven't opened the door for it to come. It's already there. It's ever present. Remember that. We'll come back to that one, inshallah. Shukran, everyone, for your time and your effort. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give complete recovery to my wife, Sheikh Shiraz, Imam Rayan, and all the sick out there. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them and the family to cope during these difficult times. Shukran jazilan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Muhammad Fasih, you want, should I phone you?
Yeah, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.